Today on Would You Believe It, discover the tragic story of the world's first fashion victim. Hear the secret testimony of America's first alien abductee. See a 100-foot-high work of art, the life's work of one man who believes that actions speak louder than words. Travel to Gettysburg and witness the unheard truths and hidden stories from America's most terrible battle. Visit the strange, the bizarre, and the unexpected on Would You Believe It?
I think that the governments of the world know a lot more than they're telling us.
Here deep in the woods of New Hampshire lives a woman with a mission. It is said that the truth is out there, and Kathy Martin has made it her job to get to that truth and document it.
Our government and the governments of the world need to very slowly introduce the public to the idea that there may be people on other planets.
Kathy is a UFO investigator working for MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network.
The first thing that I look for in determining what I'm going to write in my report is physical evidence.
As a trained expert in UFO phenomena, Kathy has been exposed to a number of examples of physical evidence, proof of extraterrestrial contact.
If there has been a landing, for example, you might find that the bark on the trees has curled. And in conjunction with this, you will see the evidence of perhaps a tripod where the craft had set down. You may find a residue underneath that area. In one case that I'm aware of, there was actually an unfortunate porcupine who was underneath the craft, and it looked like a cartoon character that had been completely flattened, and it had been microwaved.
Kathy's first investigation was particularly close to home. It was the experience that motivated her to devote her life to hunting down alien visitors. Kathy's aunt is Betty Hill. In 1963, Betty and her late husband Barney became the first Americans to document an experience of contact with alien life, known by the classification Close Encounter of the Third Kind.
My experience began on September 19, 1961, when Barney and I were in Montreal, Canada, and decided to return home to Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
There's no doubt in my mind that the Hill case is a good, valid case, and there are several reasons for that. Number one, both Betty and Barney Hill were exceptional people in the community. They were both well-known, well-liked in the community, had absolutely nothing to gain by coming out with a story such as this, and quite a lot to lose.
So we're driving along, and all of a sudden, I saw what I told Barney I thought was a new star in the sky. So we got out of the car with the binoculars. We thought maybe it's a satellite. Well, I looked at it first through the binoculars, and I was puzzled. Then I gave the binoculars to Barney, and he watched it while I returned to the car. And he said, they've seen us, and they've changed direction, and they're coming this way. Barney saw a curved, lighted window with a group of men standing behind the window looking down at him. And about 30 miles south of this area, we're driving along, and all of a sudden, the men that he had seen on board the craft were now standing in the middle of the road, blocking our way.
That was the last that either Betty or Barney remembered of that night. The next thing they knew, it was dawn, and they were pulling up at their house. Over 3 hours of their journey was unaccounted for. On later examination, Betty found her dress had been discolored by an organic substance. Lab tests showed that this was not of a known terrestrial origin. Despite their obvious distress, neither Betty nor Barney could remember the details of what had happened to them that night. They did know, however, that something was wrong.
They started to try to find the spot where this occurred. They knew that they had encountered a roadblock, and they knew that there was a period of missing time.
Betty and Barney were unsuccessful in their attempts to piece together the puzzle they had been left with. When Barney became ill as a result of stress, they sought medical advice.
The initial evaluation was done by a medical doctor who said, well, I think, you've got some kind of a physical problem that we need to evaluate, and eventually got to Dr. Benjamin Simon, who did the hypnosis. Dr. Simon wasn't looking for a UFO case. Dr. Simon was trying to see what was the problem, why did we have some anxiety here, and that kind of thing. And he uncovered the UFO case.
When Betty and Barney were regressed to the missing time via hypnosis, the true story of their interrupted journey was revealed.
We were able to recall everything that happened. The men who were blocking the road came up in 2 groups, took us out of the car along a path in the woods to where the craft was on the ground. I was taken on board, and Barney was taken into one room, and I was taken into another room. The one who did the testing, we called the examiner. Well, my exam, first they put me on a stool, and they checked my eyes, ears, nose, throat. He put me on a table and said they wanted to check my nervous system. Then they tried to insert a needle-like instrument in my navel, which caused pain, so they stopped doing it. Barney's exam was very much like mine in the beginning, except they were interested in his bone structure.
The Hill case was the flagship of the UFO abduction because there were so many firsts on that case. The needle in the navel being a pregnancy test. We didn't actually do embryonic testing until the late 60s. How did Mrs. Hill know that this was a pregnancy test back before the doctors did? Another interesting factor of the case is Betty drew a star map that, under hypnosis, that was supposedly given to her or shown to her by one of the occupants of the craft.
So I said, I know you're not from this planet, but where are you from? And he showed me a star map.
Subsequent to that, Marjorie Fish tried to put that into a computer database to find out where the star pattern was. Couldn't match it. A couple of years later, new star guide comes out and has 2 stars that we didn't know before in that catalog. Marjorie Fish runs it again, and bingo, perfect match with 2 stars. How did Betty know those 2 stars existed when our astronomers didn't know? That kind of interesting, solid, no-nonsense information that was brought out by the Hill case leads a lot of credibility to the case.
The most startling results from Dr. Simon's sessions came when he persuaded a very distressed Barney to describe his abductors. This sketch was drawn by Barney under hypnosis. Barney's descriptions and sketches were then used by local artist David Baker to create this image, now recognized as a classic alien face, but at the time, a face responsible for Barney's nightmares. With so many myths and images surrounding the subject of UFOs and alien abductions, it is easy to forget that these images have not always been with us. Our current knowledge has been gained at the cost of the individuals involved, for many of whom life was never the same again.
I'm excited about God in the Bible, in the Lord, and I'm excited about people. And I want the world to talk about love and being nice to each other. And I'm just excited about everything. I'm excited when paint comes in, and I'm just excited.
Leonard Knight is a man with a message, and a unique way of getting that message across. When you live in Slab City, California, near the Salton Sea, it might be difficult to get the attention of people passing by. People rarely pass by Slab City. It's a dead end in the middle of nowhere, a huge squatters camp on a deserted army base where people come in their RVs to enjoy rent-free sun. A challenge for an artist with a message to reach his intended audience then? Not for Leonard Knight. This is Leonard's ongoing work of evangelical art, 10 stories high and wider than a football field. He calls it Salvation Mountain, and while it may not be California's highest peak, it's certainly the most colorful.
I had a hot air balloon, and it rotted out on me here, I'm glad to say. So I figured I'd put God His love on the mountain. And I planned to stay 1 week and make a little 8-foot one 13 years ago. And through the love of people, and it expanded. It got bigger than 8 feet.
Leonard's been here for 13 years, and he's been so busy working on his mountain that he has only just started building his living quarters. This is the first room.
Building this thing cost about $17 or $18, and I put about $14 in liquid nail and 2 pounds of nails, and everything was free. And the mountain is pretty clay, nice clay, so I mixed it and just put straw with it, and people gave me the straw, and I had to get a lot of water for it. But I like to drive my truck in town and get 55-gallon drums of water and have coffee. So that really didn't cost me anything. And I really believe it didn't cost $20.
In case you're wondering, yes, Leonard did decorate his home himself.
The decorations are made by adobe, and when it's wet, it's easy, and all I do is put my fist in it, see how it fits? And I pull my fist out and let the California sun dry it, and there's the flower.
For now, Leonard lives in a converted truck, donated by a local merchant when his previous truck was entered into an art exhibition.
In 1983, I bought it in Nebraska. It was an old beat-up truck sitting out in the farmyard, and I just took a liking to it. And for 17 years, I've lived in it, and I painted it up. And it got into Baltimore, Maryland Museum for a 6-month exhibit a couple years ago. And when it did, I didn't want to live in a tent, so a fish man here in town gave me this other truck. It was a 1939 white fire truck, and I live in that happier now than the other one. So now I got 2.
Salvation Mountain must be the only piece of art in the world with its own built-in road map. To take the tour, simply follow the yellow brick road. Water's in short supply out here in the desert, so Leonard painted it. This is a waterfall, washing down to the greenery of the forest. And at the base of the mountain, the Sea of Galilee, complete with boat. In order to keep the mountain in the excellent condition you see here, Leonard has to constantly apply new layers of paint to ward off the desert sun. He gets his paint from volunteers who've heard of his mountainous artwork and want to help out.
I usually wake up in the mornings really early because I'm so anxious for the sun to come so I can paint on the mountain that I get restless. And I'm the first one into Gaston's restaurant for coffee. I get in there about 5:30, and they don't open till 6. But then I race back here, and I'm all excited about putting paint on the mountain. And I'm so happy that the day is here. I got all day to work on the mountain and do exactly what I want to do. I like to do different things. I don't have to go and read a book in a library and do it just exactly like everybody else. Maybe that's why they like the mountain in this so much. It's just plain totally different. I feel really excited when the Earth Art Raw Vision people in the museums say that I'm an artist. And I'm going to try real hard to be an artist, and I'm still working on it a lot. I like my life a lot, and now that people are coming in with more compliments and my enthusiasm gets above 100 every day.
Salvation Mountain is Slab City's premier tourist attraction, but not everyone is as happy as Leonard. In 1984, local councilors voted to clean up the area, and that meant getting rid of Leonard and his visionary artwork. They quoted dangerous levels of lead in the soil from Leonard's paint, but Leonard and sympathetic Slab City residents fought back.
Supervisors in 1994 decided they voted 4 out of 5 to take the mountain down and clean up the slabs and make a paying campground. And the Layla environmentalists came in and dug 12 holes, and I ended up in the paper, big toxic nightmare, and I'm contaminating the people, and I'm a health hazard, and it's all in the paper to prove that. When the Earth Art Raw Vision people and individual people that backed me up and told them that to get off my back, really, they did, and they've been gentlemen ever since.
Now Salvation Mountain is being shortlisted as a national monument, which should mean that Leonard can carry on with his art unmolested by local developers.
I'd like to have so much paint on this whole thing that in 40 years it'll still be standing.
For many people, the search for salvation is a spiritual quest. For Leonard Knight, salvation is a 100-foot-high mountain in the middle of nowhere.
I'm very happy here in the desert. I don't want to be anywhere else.
This is London's Bond Street, first fashion stop for everybody who knows what's in and what's out. And for those who don't, there have always been experts ever ready to point you in the right direction. Nowadays, it's industry giants. In the 1700s, all of England looked to one man to show them what to wear. His name was George Bryan Brummel, or Beau Brummel. He'd come to this house, here on exclusive Chesterfield Street, London, drawn by his love of immaculate dress. He was keen for the aristocracy to notice a brand new, simple look he'd perfected, and he thought everybody should be wearing. Here in Savile Row, world-famous tailors Gives and Hawkes have a special affection for Beau Brummel.
He brought those styles from the country and created a look that was stylish and became the fashion mode of the day.
His genial manner gained him many friends in high places as his influence spread further still. Orders crammed the desks of the many supremely skilled craftsmen who worked in the city. They were no longer being asked for the usual patterns. This was a completely new look, and they had their work cut out trying to keep up. It seemed, so did Beau. He'd befriended the young Prince Regent, and the two of them constantly entertained at the best residences in London. Many of their guests were as interested in seeing Brummel in his finery as they were in meeting the future king. This constant attention made Beau obsessive about his daily preparations. He'd send his suits to be pressed in the country so they would return smelling fresh. He bathed in eau de cologne and purified water. He spent an hour a day with his hairdresser and 2 hours a day tying his cravat.
Perhaps most notable in his concepts was the cravat, because having developed such a simple look where the cut was simple and stylish, the cloth was exquisite, and the tailoring second to none, there was little else you could give to that look save for the sole embellishment of the cravat. And he's noted for the starching and the arrangement of his cravat, creating great despair with his valet and others as he perfected the look each day. The cravat was so precisely arranged that it inhibited his movement. And his look, he developed a look where he was, if you like, the standing signpost as to how others should look, and they all slavishly tried to follow him, some finding it too difficult.
But this attention to detail cost enormous sums of money, and Brummel spent every last penny at the most expensive boutiques in London. The Prince Regent helped where he could, but he'd spent the majority of his money building this, the extravagant Royal Pavilion Palace, his weekend retreat on the south coast in Brighton. By 1816, Brummel had incurred insurmountable debts, and worse, people angered by his continuing flamboyant lifestyle were starting to ignore his views. It was time to leave.
The lifestyle that Beau Brummel lived, though always with the nobility, taxed and imposed many problems upon him because he was not a man of great private means, and so he relied on the generosity and the hospitality of others. And in the end, by 1816, if you like, they called his number. He walked, in a sense, a narrow line and lived a slender, shallow life, but always managed to survive until 1816, when partly through debt and partly through overall unpopularity, he had to flee the country and go to Calais.
His plan was to lie low in Paris, but when word spread that the famous Beau Brummel was in town, he was found and drawn into Parisian high society. After 14 years, the novelty wore off. He'd taken advantage of his new French benefactors just as he had in London. The dizzying cost of high fashion had grown higher and came with an even greater cost. The immaculate dandy found himself arrested here and thrown into debtor's prison. The break in his elaborate routine confused the friendless Brummel. Soon the new rituals of only bathing once a week and being locked in a dirt-ridden room took its toll on his mind. It was too much for him to bear. He quickly went mad, became ill, and died alone in his cell, no longer dressed immaculately, but wearing a filthy set of prison clothes. Tragically, the man who tried so desperately to instill fashion sense all his life had finally been driven insensible by his passion. You could say Beau Brummel had become the first fashion victim. Would you believe it? The quiet fields of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Almost everyone knows what happened here during America's Civil War in July of 1863. The terrible slaughter of young men from the North and South of this divided nation. 51,000 casualties in just 3 days in some of the most bloody engagements of any war. Some Union regiments registered losses as high as 82%, some Confederate units 90%. Such was the confusion, Union estimates calculated it took 240 pounds of gunpowder and 900 pounds of lead to shoot a single Confederate soldier. For a conflict so well documented, there were a great many other Civil War facts which have gone largely unrecorded. For example, who remembers that the Northern forces contained 3,500 Native Americans and nearly 200,000 African Americans? Also among their ranks, manning guns, were several hundred Germans who lived in Pennsylvania. Their European neighbors, the French, meanwhile, had sent men to fight for the Confederates, whose numbers were also swelled by some Mexican units. Back at Gettysburg was the youngest general ever to command U.S. troops, the 23-year-old George Armstrong Custer. Ironically, he was fighting alongside the Native Americans he was so famously to engage in battle years later. The oldest man to fight in the battle was 69-year-old John Burns. He'd served in the militia as a youngster and had always crowed, if the Confederates come close enough, he'd shoulder a rifle and show everyone how to shoot. As a Union regiment passed his house in the town, he slipped into the ranks carrying his antique rifle and marched into battle with them. Legend has it, to the amazement of the soldiers, John, the only civilian from Gettysburg to fight in the battle, proved to be an expert shot. His bravery led him to become known as the hero of Gettysburg, and when Lincoln gave his address here, he asked to meet Burns to thank him personally. This statue now stands on the battlefield next to those which honor some of America's greatest military leaders. This is General Buford, one of the Union officers credited with choosing Gettysburg as the location for the battle. Strangely, while fighting for the cause of anti-slavery, his family owned 11 slaves in his home state of Kentucky. Buford also had a black manservant here on the battlefield with him, who was reputed to be a slave. One of the Confederates approaching the field was a very close friend of Buford's from West Point Military Academy, General Hill. At odds with the Southern cause, and unlike his friend across the field, he was vehemently opposed to slavery. This is perhaps one of the most forgotten figures of the Battle of Gettysburg, General Meade. Having won this, possibly the most important battle of the war, he has largely been written out of history because he didn't get on with his commander-in-chief, President Lincoln, and he hated the press. The man he beat, General Robert E. Lee, on the other hand, has become famous for his spirit and daring. Notably, he hasn't been remembered for his fondness for his pet chicken that had befriended his men, who allowed it to enter Lee's tent and lay an egg under his bed every day of the war. As the retreat was sounded to withdraw after Lee's surrender, the chicken was nowhere to be seen. The commanding general joined in the search and was not content until it was found alive and well and placed on his own wagon for safety. Someone who doesn't have a statue here is General Sickles. He was given $28,000 to have one built in his honor, but in typical Sickles tradition, he decided he didn't need no monument, but he did need $28,000. This simple stone stands marking the spot where this colorful character had his leg blown off. Artillery fire had bombarded his headquarters in this barn all day, destroying the date plate and knocking a hole in the side wall. It's said as he was taken off the field, he asked for two things, a cigar and a box for his leg. General Sickles' leg was eventually displayed in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., where he would take people to visit it. As this photograph of the barn taken after the battle shows, horses were particularly vulnerable to artillery fire. Over 3,000 of them were killed. One Union battalion lost 80 of its 88 horses here in this yard. This is the statue of some more fortunate beasts. In the middle of a bombardment, these birds were blown out of a tree when a cannonball lodged in the trunk. A young soldier noticed their plight amidst the mayhem, hung his pack on a lower branch of the tree, grabbed the nest, scurried up the trunk, and replaced them safely in the branches. This monument remains today, overlooking the battlefields where so many men lost their lives. It commemorates a rare civil gesture during a most uncivil war. Would you believe it?